Film Trace. This is a podcast where we trace the life of a movie from conception, production, all the way to release and reception. I'm going to call this a special movie. This is a special movie.
You said
Forced
that
me into picking. You forced me into picking it.
I did. It was a horrendous choice between Army of Thieves, the spin-off that somehow is like not being talked about on the internet at all.
Yeah, does it even exist? I see it on Netflix, but no one's watched it, so I don't think it's real.
Spin-off of Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead zombie movie, which had a lot of runway and I don't know if you call it buzz, but just people were discussing it for a hot minute. Though that
and also our season 4 premiere, wasn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
So
we were on the hype train.
Right. So I mean, we had it in there, and it's like one of Netflix's only like really big movies for the months of November, December, with maybe the exception of that Rebecca Hall movie, Passing, that they're trying to pump for Oscars. But I just wasn't feeling it, and I don't think you were either. No, we didn't really want to dive back into that world, especially sans zombies. So
it was tough enough to watch that movie. I mean, that movie, honestly, seriously, was one of the hardest watches of my life.
No one wants to go back there. So let's instead, I thought, take a look at what Paramount Plus had for offerings this past week, because why not? I let my trial lapse and paid $6 anyways. So let's check out Paranormal Activity: Next of Kin. And I've never seen a Paranormal Activity,
which is crazy to me, because like Paranormal Activity, like unless you lived under a rock, like was like the biggest movie, one of the biggest movies in like the mid 2007 it came out, and it was like nuts. I mean, do you remember like the thing that sticks out to me back then? And I didn't see it in the theater back then, but it was like the TV ads that were popping up.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember these? It was basically the classic showing the audience,
right? Like night vision reactions, yeah.
And then like people were like losing their minds. But that obviously, like Paranormal Activity was like, we'll dive a little bit deeper into that. A huge hit back then. Spawned what? I don't even know how many movies there are. This is the 7th movie. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If
you don't count the Japanese spinoff, I believe,
which was a sequel to the original. I don't know.
I don't know.
It was very confusing, but it spawned this massive horror. I don't know what you call it, series, franchise, if you will. Put
loosely
Jason
connected,
Blum, loosely connected. They're not like the first 4 seem to be pretty. I don't even know. I don't know how to talk about them because like I've only seen the first 2. And obviously this last Paranormal Activity: Next of Kin. I guess they're loosely, tied together. It launched Jason Blum, which is super important because he's basically like owns the horror genre now through Blumhouse Productions. That was his first real sort of kickoff. It was a huge deal back then. And the thing that always like struck me a little bit odd with the Paranormal Activity thing was that, I didn't see it till years after it came out. And I was like, wait, this is what the buzz was about? Because it's like, it's not scary. Like it's basically home videos of like security footage of a house, and that's kind of all it really is. And so I think it was one of those films that came along at the exact right time, and you had to see it with a group of people in the theater, and it like amped everybody up. I think that's one of the reasons why it was so successful. The thing was shot for like $15,000, the original.
Right.
And I think, what's the story? I have it listed somewhere. Yeah, shot for $15,000. Played at some horror scream festival. It was spotted by a CAA rep who quickly signed the director. It's Oren Pelly, I think his name is. Mm-hmm. They sent out DVDs to everybody in the industry, and Jason Blum got one because he was, I think, doing his own thing, wanted to produce it or at least release it. They went back, did like $200K more of work on the film in terms of editing, music, stuff like that, and then put it out in 2007. It was just unbelievable hit. Did $193 million, I think. Oh no, what did it do domestically? I have it down somewhere. Why did you avoid these movies? Is the real question I have.
Thank you for asking. I was begging to tell you. I think it's because
it doesn't make sense. I would imagine that you would have seen most of these.
Well, if you look at it on the surface, yeah, like I very much like you was astounded and kind of obsessed with the Blair Witch Project, the kind of
Oh God, we can talk
original
about that for hours.
found footage. Yeah, or whenever we got that 20th anniversary, that we'll definitely dive back into that.
8 years from now, no, that's the 30th anniversary. Season
Oh
38. Finally, we got to it.
Oh man, such is our life. The real reason I think was just like I was definitely kind of out of love with the horror genre in the mid to late 2000s.
Why?
I'm looking back, and what did we have back then? Like the Rob Zombie Halloween movies.
It was bad.
Dead Silence. 1408, The Mist, like some of the worst Stephen King adaptations.
Whoa. Are you gonna attack The Mist on this show in my presence?
Yeah, I am.
One of my favorite movies.
Oh my God.
It's so good. Perfection.
It was just a bad time period for horror, I think.
Well,
overall.
Yeah.
Especially compared to the kind of renaissance that came after and kind of the winding down of like the late 90s, early 2000s, rush of like embracing the corniness of Scream and what have you. And also like a lot of good, like, especially foreign art horror movies were happening. I think, High Tension and stuff like movie. That. Right. Yeah. 2007 was also the year of 28 Weeks Later, one of the most disappointing sequels.
Very true.
I do think that I was just kind of turned off from that type of movie. I also think that there was just something. So at least in the buzz and in the commercials, it seemed like there was nothing much going on in them, and it sounds like I didn't really miss much if it is exactly like you say, surveillance cameras. Like, I don't know. I mean, I am curious now, having watched this 7th installment, and also learning. I don't think I knew before I read our notes that you put together about just how insanely profitable this was, and that's makes me curious of how exactly that happened. So I might. I mean, we had a similar discussion back when we did the episode on The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It.
Yeah.
I similarly had little to no interest in the Conjuring universe and James Wan in general, but now I've been reinvigorated, especially with this year's Malignant.
Don't say it. I've never been more angry at a movie. I wanted to kick in my TV. Like, I was so pissed off.
Oh my God.
Big fan of that. So you're not like I kind of tend to explore a little bit more on the horror genre, especially on the mainstream side.
Sure.
Just because I'm curious to see like what people are talking, like what people are into. Paranormal Activity, to me though, it took me years to see the original, and it is exactly what you get in the trailer. It's just security home video of a couple fighting a lot and some weird stuff moving, and then it gets really dumb at the end. And I think the weird thing about the Paranormal Activity thing, I think for us specifically, and you mentioned this, is that we were teenagers when Blair Witch came out. And Blair Witch, if you haven't seen it, you probably have, but if you haven't, I just rewatched it last week for like a horror Halloween marathon. I watch it probably about once a year, actually, now that I think about it. I think what's awesome about that movie is back then it was powerful because it was found footage. It was one of the first found footage movies. It was not the first.
Okay.
Right. There was definitely some other movies along the way, but it is specifically kind of a horror genre. I mean, you can even go all the way back to Cannibal Holocaust, which is, an infamous film that was found footage and like really played up found footage so much that the director was put in jail in Italy because they thought it was a snuff film.
Right.
Like that's how deep that one went. And they went pretty deep on Blair Witch too, right? Like the internet was just coming into being. And so they used that advantage of people not really understanding how the internet works. And is this stuff true? Is it not true? And played up this mythology that this footage was real. And by the time we get to, it landed with a splash and it was a hugely successful movie. back then considered to be the most successful or most profitable movie of all time, Blair Witch, that is. And by the time this hits, it's sort of like, well, been there, done that, right? Like,
Right.
I was sort of like, well, we've already done this, and not even 10 years ago. So, like, what are we trying to do here? And I think the thing that made it interesting to me was that there was no playing up that this was real. That didn't happen in any of the marketing at all. Like, this is, they never said, hey, this is actually home footage of a house, of a real
Right,
family.
right.
No, it's like, oh no, this is a movie, which I always found also kind of a little bit strange, because it was like maybe audiences were too cynical by then to believe in something like that. I mean, it is hard to believe. I always ask this of people when they first saw Blair Witch, but did you think it was real?
No. I mean, I think there was like definitely a piece of my teenage self that was
that wanted to be real.
Yeah, but no. I think
we were much too cynical at that age. To believe.
Absolutely. I mean, I had at that point definitely lost faith in God. So why would I have faith in paranormal?
What about faith in the devil, though?
What's his name? Asmodeus.
Yeah, can't even. I tried to get into the mythology of this stuff, and I'm like, no, dude, this is not even remotely interesting.
I'm actually going back through the history of found footage, and I'm remembering, I don't know why the hell I did. I think this is one of my first years teaching, straight out of college, and like I was trying to very much like appease my students, and I taught film studies, and so there was another movie in 2007 that all my students were telling me to see, and I saw, and I regretted it instantly. I don't know if you ever heard of it or saw it. The Poughkeepsie tapes.
Oh, classic, yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah,
let's
not
talk
good.
About it's just like Hannibal Holocaust. Like they're like actively trying to disgust you and disturb you, and
it's uncomfortable, and not in a fun way.
Right. So I think that maybe is another thing that might have turned me off, that I've forgotten about until now. It's just like that whole style, like you had said, it definitely felt played out by 2007.
Well, also like Paranormal Activity felt like a total gimmick. And like, because when you get those ads of the people sitting in the theater in night vision, you're like, oh, this feels like the 1970s, like an ad for 1970s. Like, you know what I mean? Like a really old school sales technique. And it just felt really uncool to us millennial hipsters. Like, it just did not. It felt very inauthentic.
I mean, I felt very cynical going to see Cloverfield the next year, 2008, too.
Oh, was that the year after? Okay, I was trying to figure out when that was, because that's, I mean, probably another huge found footage movie.
Right.
But by the time you get to that one, wow, does it feel lame?
Yeah, totally. Like it's so like corporatized in that film in particular that you can't even bank on the fact that like Paranormal Activity, at least the first one, costs so little to make. Did that continue to be true for the subsequent?
I didn't see the budgets on all of them, but I can't imagine like any of them. It is Blum, Jason Blum, and he has like one of those hard rules about like budgets.
Yeah.
He basically, his rule was like 5 million, I think.
Okay. Number 2 was 3 million. I'm just doing some quick Wikipediaing, and number 3 was 5 million. So so steadily going up, but still staying around or under 5 mil.
And just the returns in North America. So the original was like what, at most, I think it was bought for distribution for like 350K. There's 107 million.
Yeah.
Second one, like you said, what was it? $3 million budget. $84 million. This is just in North America. Like, so like if you, the reason why I do North America, because it's easier to calculate what they pulled in. It's 50%, right? So the studio gets 50% of the ticket sales. So in the first one, you're talking, that's almost all profit. $106 million like and that's not even include the world box office. So it's, these things were real money makers, and it put the Blumhouse model on the map essentially. You can make something for under 5 million, definitely under $10 million, and all you got to do is do like $30 million at the box office. Which is not that hard if you have the right marketing campaign behind it.
Right. And by the time they got around to the fifth one where they dropped the numbers, it was just called Paranormal Activity: The Ghost Dimension. They were putting out 10 million to make that, and that was the first Paranormal Activity movie to make under 100 domestic. It made only 78.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, kind of impressive that they are eking it out still with Next of Kin.
Well, it's interesting too because he said Ghost Dimension. Blum said Ghost Dimension was going to be the last one. This one came out in 2015. I remember following it on. Was I doing it on? I don't think I was doing the Wildline box office podcast yet, but like I remember looking at that one. I was like, oh, this is over.
Yeah.
Like it like completely was DOA. Jason Blum said it was the last one, but here we are again. Here we are again with Paranormal Activity: Next of Kin. 6 years after the last Paranormal Activity movie.
Yeah. Why don't you run down for our dear listeners, Dan, what the hell this one is about?
That's a great question. So essentially it does do a found footage still, lightly. I would say it's a light found footage movie. So Margot, a young woman who is abandoned by her mother as a baby, travels to a secluded Amish community with a documentary film crew seeking answers about her mother and extended family.
Skeleton crew. It's two guys.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, two guys, one for the one romance, one comedic relief.
Yeah.
And I, it's it. One thing to know, it doesn't take place inside of a house mostly, right? There's a lot of shots outside. It takes place in an Amish community, so it's very different than the other films. There is not that, and I think one of the draws of the original Paranormal Activity was that it could take place in your cookie cutter apartment building like I live in.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's kind of brought like the ghostliness and hauntingness to a very sterile, sort of benign environment, which is scary. I think to some degree. And here, they're a crew sort of traveling to a strange place with a strange society and group of people. I mean, there's a lot of hints here. I say to like Wicker Man and Midsummer kept coming to mind.
Yeah.
The outsiders and sort of this strange community that kind of feels like a cult, so to speak.
The horror movie by the Farrelly brothers, Kingpin, right?
Yeah, exactly, right. And so I mean that's kind of the setup. They get out there, things get weird. What do you think about this found footage? Like, there's two big questions, and it comes up in like a lot of the critical talk about this movie. It irked a lot of people that it didn't seem to commit fully to the found footage perspective. Right. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean it's one of those things that is I'd say moderately distracting when you're like he's a character goes to the car outside to get something they forgot and they just so happen to bring their camera along with them, and it's just it definitely helps bolster that argument that it's just like where you wonder, like, I mean, that's kind of the point of our show, right? We need to dig in. Do we think is there any evidence out there that like this was meant to be a script for a Paranormal Activity movie all along, and B, how committed really is anybody to the found footage? Like I mean, at one point, especially in the era of Blair Witch, and I'd say even probably in the era of the original Paranormal Activity, was almost like a dogmatic, right? Like a Dogma 95 style kind of ethos for horror, especially for horror directors to kind of bring that verisimilitude to the screen.
Yeah.
But how much does that really matter? I don't know. Like I come into this not knowing the style and how it's evolved over the course of the franchise, and it seems like you basically only stuck with them for the second one. So maybe
neither of us know we're walking in a blizzard here. That's on an Amish farm is what we're doing.
And maybe we'll suddenly go to slow motion for no reason.
Well, yeah, dude, I love that. Was like a favorite thing. It's funny you bring that up because I do think it's important even to sort of go back again to Blair Witch, where that was total commitment.
Yeah.
That was, we're going to get young actors who are going to improv most of the movie. They're going to give them some sort of hints about, basically some beats, but all the dialogues improvised, right?
Right.
And they're filming. Right, that was the actors were filming themselves.
Yeah, the
right?
actors
There
were
was
also the filmmakers.
correct, yeah. So it was sort of like that was a total commitment to it, and you see that play out in the film because the experience for the audience is one where you do feel like you're there with them. And so you're inhabiting their emotions, their fear, which is vital to this subgenre of horror. And if you don't do that sort of connection to the audience, and I think that's why I didn't like Paranormal Activity all that much, the original, there was no connection there.
Yeah.
Right. We were voyeurs.
Right.
And
It's literally surveillance footage.
yeah,
Which
exactly. It's
is
like we're the
already like
Stasi or something. Like
right. A number of degrees removed.
yeah, there's a distance there where you did not have that at all in Blair Witch. You felt like you were there with the kids making the movie in the woods.
Yeah. Like the iconic shot of Heather, like with the camera up her snotty nose in the middle of the night, right?
Is it like the first selfie? Okay. But yeah, exactly. Which is kind of interesting too, because there's a whole, I mean, we could talk about Blair Witch forever. This one is interesting too because it doesn't have the static camera of the original one. I think the second one was a static camera too, for the most part.
Okay.
Here, we are supposed to be with this film crew, this group of friends almost, and well, actually, it's not even a group of friends. It's just like a boyfriend, girlfriend, and then a sound guy that shows up.
And how they procured the sound guy is left to the viewer's imagination.
Yeah, I know, so it doesn't. We do have masks involved because it is.
Yeah, I was going to mention that.
Yeah, because a little pandemic sort of nod in history as people will go back and watch it in 20 years. Like, what are these masks for?
I will say that the one piece of comic relief that probably did get me is when he says the sound guy picks them up from the airport. He's got a mask on, and they ask if they can all take masks off, and the sound guy says, "Oh yeah, I've had COVID like 5 times."
At least like 40 times, I think.
Or something like that. It was like that. I mean, first time like COVID related humor in the media, I think really
going for it. The first to the jokes, it's a tough spot to be in.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that like the original question was like, how committed are people to found footage? And I think that the criticism on this movie is that like it feels like the found footage is slapped onto a script meant for something else. I think that's totally fair. I think that feels true. Now we have to know who wrote this thing.
Yes.
So director is William Eubank, who did Love, which is the Angels and Airwaves film, which I've not seen, unfortunately, because I am an Angels and Airwaves fanboy and I love the band, but I don't think I can do that to myself. He did Signal in 2014, which I sort of remember watching. Is that about cell phone signals being like inhabited by ghosts or something?
Yeah, it was a American remake of I don't remember where the original was from.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And then he did Underwater, which have you not seen Underwater?
No, I've been wanting to for a while.
God, this is a film made for you.
Yeah.
It is just like hyper stylized and really interesting. I mean, it's not a great film, but it is. I found it to be super interesting and engaging and a really rich visual style to it. So that's William Eubank, but I think the writer here is even more important. Christopher Landon, who's the son of Michael Landon, the old TV star. If you're a little bit older, you might remember him. He's written all this stuff like Disturbia, Paranormal Activity 2, Paranormal Activity 3, 4, the marked ones. He did Viral in 2016. And I think most importantly, he's also a director. Yeah. He wrote and directed the Paranormal Activity 4 and the marked ones, but Happy Death Day wrote and directed. Yeah. Happy Death Day to You wrote and directed, and also Freaky he wrote and direct. There's something there. Like, I did not know this guy. Did you know him before this?
I mean, I didn't know him by name, but I mean, I just happened to have been following him on Twitter as I was, seeing, especially like he's one of those kind of tweeters that has like a fresh voice and is not ashamed to like
have an opinion, right?
Have an opinion, self-promote, like Scott Derrickson and that whole crew of the newer wave of mainstream horror people. And like the Happy Death Day movies are fun. I haven't seen Freaky yet, but I've heard great things.
Oh, Freaky's fantastic. I think one of the better horror films of the last couple of years.
So yeah, I was honestly surprised that it almost feels like he's like I don't know, do we know when he wrote this, or like why? It seemed like he had finally graduated from this franchise.
You know what was weird about this one too, and it's like it's a tougher movie to do a film trace on because there's next to zero interviews.
Right. No press junket.
No press junket. It was originally supposed to be in theaters, I believe, in February of last year, maybe. And they kept pushing it and like, oh yeah, we're gonna put it in theaters. And I'm like, oh wait a second, we need to get more subscriptions to Paramount Plus.
Now that'd be a subscription service.
Hey, why is there not? Yeah. And so they dumped it on Paramount Plus, and you know, I don't know. It's clear to me that what's crazy about this is the guy, huge box office reporter, I forget his name, but he writes for Forbes, Scott something, Mendelson, I think. Mm-hmm. He wrote a whole article about this in the last couple of days about how this movie could have done well at the box office. That's delusional thing. Like there's no way in hell this movie is making more than $4 million over the Halloween weekend.
Yeah.
So it was dumped. There's not a lot of information about it. We don't know when it was written. We don't even know how it was developed. Like I was looking at Deadline. Like Deadline's kind of like the Bible for movie development. Like when people get cast, when a script gets sold, stuff like that. Nothing. So it sounds like, you know, Christopher Landon's kind of the house writer at the Blumverse, as I call it. And they probably just tapped him like, hey, do you want to do this? I mean, like, you know, I think it was probably just a quick cash grab. Yeah. Or just maybe they were bored or something and they needed something to do, which sounds bizarre, but it does happen in these situations, especially like a place like Blumhouse Productions where it's kind of a factory model where it's just constantly churning out films no matter what. They don't want any downtime. So yeah, it's a little bit of a gray or sort of gray area here about how this came to be, but it does really have the feeling of a movie that was not meant to be found footage and also not meant to be Paranormal Activity.
Right.
Like it feels like Christopher Landon wrote this as maybe like a standalone feature that he wanted to do or something, because it doesn't really relate to the other movies, and the found footage I find is kind of almost distracting.
Yeah.
Now the question is, would it work without the found footage? I don't know. What do you think about that? Like, let me throw that back at you. Could it work at all?
Because then it would just be this character of Margot, you know, traveling to the Amish community. Like the other clear, I mean, I don't know, it's hard. I mean, I guess now is the time for the spoiler alert.
Let's spoil this thing.
I don't know if I'd recommend watching it, but I mean, it's kind of interesting as a curio maybe, for horror fanatics, especially considering the history of the found footage subgenre. My main thing is I'm not only distracted from those moments that clearly like shouldn't be found footage, or they like stray away from like the true, you know, thinking about, is this supposed to be part of their documentary, or you know, is the camera rolling just to collect, like there's so many things that pile up from the fact that they're in Amish community that doesn't allow you know, technology, from the fact that they are you know, operating without electricity, and so they're relying on a generator. But also, like, if they're, you know, relying on a generator, why are they using up so much battery life for, you know, random conversations? But then there's, you know, the reveal that is like maybe not even a full reveal, because there's not really much other explanation, but that you know, they're not actually Amish, and that the patriarch of the family actually has a laptop that he's been like using to plan this luring of Margot to their community, where it just doesn't, it's like there's so many unanswered questions that you definitely get to the point where, like, even as the tension starts ratcheting up, your mind's going in a million different directions, wondering how everything actually works, when
it
clearly
it
doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't work at all. Like, I kind of gave up on that immediately.
Okay, but my theory is that maybe this is like I'm guessing, since when this was like a really like booming franchise, and Landon was clearly like dedicated to Blum, and that whatever that vision was, which was definitely like more of a product vision than an artistic vision.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so he probably just like churned out a bunch of treatments, right, for like potential paranormal activities. And when, you know, when they decided to like try to go back, I mean, everybody was doing a lot of flailing, grasping at straws during the pandemic, and I imagine that Blumhouse did that too. And so they pulled out Landon's old treatments and like, what about this one? Because Midsummer was, you know, the talk of the town. So let's try to do something in that vein. And Landon is probably like, sure, you can do whatever you want with it. Just, you know, don't put another writer's name on it. I don't know. Like,
it feels like to me like this is something where I feel like the Blumverse, they have like lunch pitch meetings, and like I think like Blum had like a Reuben like in his mouth, and he's just like with like mustard on his face, and Landon goes, "What about the Amish?" And then like he almost like Blum almost chokes on his sandwich,
sauerkraut stuck in his throat.
Writes it down. That's the one. That's the one. I do like that's like my whole vision of how that works. I mean, it's like very. It reminds me of like maybe like the old record studios, you know, like essentially like churning out hits, like a
loosey goosey boys club.
Yeah. And I mean that definitely has that feel to it where it's sort of like, I will say this though. Okay, so this thing was filmed in what, July 2021, so not that long ago, man.
Right.
That's crazy. It's like, how long did they spend editing this thing? Clearly not that long. In any event, it does feel tacked on. The story itself, like diving deeper into that part of it. Here's the thing, I gotta say, I liked this movie. Like, I legitimately really enjoyed it, and like every 10 minutes I was like, well, I should hate this, shouldn't I? Like, this is Paranormal Activity, which I hate, I don't like. It's clearly a cash grab during the pandemic, like you stated, like it feels that way, but for some reason it kind of works for me, because I will say this,
I'm ready for
it. I do not expect these movies to make sense.
Low expectations. Got it.
Very low expectations. Also, you know, I think to me, it's sort of like the horror genre is very easy to get. It's a genre where you can do very little and accomplish a lot. Like, you don't have to do that much in a horror movie to sort of satisfy, I think, the core audience of those films. Give me sex, give me gore, give me some sort of ghoul, and like people are going to be happy, right? And I don't think I'm being sort of disingenuous. Like, that's pretty true. Yeah. And I think this movie kind of checks most of those boxes, and it does it in a way that is at least, I thought, entertaining. This is a genre pick. This is, you know, and I'm reading a lot of these reviews and reactions, and I mean, we can even just hop to that a little bit. Horrific, so to speak. 22% on Rotten Tomatoes from all critics. This Metacritic's probably not right. That's an old one. Rotten Tomatoes, the RT score of 39%, a Letterboxd score of 48, which is one of the lowest ones I've ever seen. I don't really get the negative response here. Like, and I read through these reviews, and I'm sort of like, well, what did you expect? Like, this movie was shot for next to nothing during the pandemic. You know, it's part of the Paranormal Activity series, so it's kind of going to be a little bit. It's the 7th movie in that series. Like, you don't go into like Halloween, 9 thinking, oh, this is going to be, the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life.
But did you enjoy Halloween Kills?
I hated Halloween Kills.
Because even when you're right, the expectations should be minimal and they should be adjusted. I do still think that you're always hoping that there will be some kind of surprise.
Well, you didn't find any of this surprising?
I'll say, like, it held my interest, but like, I think that that's because, like, I was curious about like picking it apart, and but I was definitely like rolling my eyes at all of the fake jump scares of the first like basically hour of the film, the musical stings attempt in an attempt to like punctuate certain suspenseful moments. But I think where I do agree with you is that they've got their formula and they know it's watchable, so like that's good enough for them. But in the end, I still think that it's one of those things where it held my interest, but I'm gonna forget about it. I would have forgotten about it already if we weren't doing a podcast about it. It's more product than it is anything else. And
I mean, that's true. I mean, I'll agree with you. It's a product at the end of the day. Like, it's not meant. The goal here is not to win an Oscar or like a anything like that. Like, there's no intention here. But I would say this though, it kind of does remind me, of here's what it doesn't feel like. And you're going to remember this kind of time period. Think back to early 2000s horror. I think post Texas Chainsaw Massacre reboot, which came out in 2003. I mean, there's this glut of lower budget, major studio horror reboots and knockoffs and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And the one that like really pops into my head is House of Wax.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember that? And like, there's just this style of horror back then that was the same thing. It was a product, but whereas back then it felt like super commercial and very, very lame, I felt like there was some sort of creative spark going on here. I don't know if you saw that at all, or is it just felt, this did not feel like I was watching House of Wax, or the remake of Last House on the Left. You know what I mean? Like, it had a very different vibe to it.
I quite enjoy the House of Wax remake because it leans into like, I mean, but there's that thing is like it feels like Next of Kin is constantly trying to toe that line between serious and leaning into the genre. And I think House of Wax knew exactly what it was, and it pulled into its trashiness. I haven't watched it for years. I'm probably wrong, but
I think you're absolutely. You gotta go rewatch.
But like, if I'm going to have a good time and actually like, embrace the genre-ness of a horror movie, I want it to really. It's a personal thing. Maybe I want the trash. Give me the trash.
I mean, this is pretty trashy. Like, there's a devil living underneath the farmhouse, or sorry, the church. That's, spoiler alert, her mother. You're not gonna care. You're not gonna watch anyways.
Yeah.
Like, it's pretty trashy. Like, that's something I liked about it. This is some really low rent stuff, right? But like, kind of a fun adventure.
Kind of. It's just.
What are the drone shots? Come on.
Oh my gosh. But yeah, I mean, I think that do you think that you're going to remember this though next year?
No. I'm not going to remember this.
Okay,
no way.
I
think what's her the lead's really good. What's her name? Emily Bader.
Yeah, she's not bad. Like,
she's good. She's solid.
I mean, the boyfriend guy, I don't know. You could take or leave him.
Ronald Buck the Third.
Yes, the comic relief sound guy. He's all right.
He's good. He's a big, I think, comedian, comedy like podcast dude. Dan Leipert, I believe his name is.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
The whole Amish cast though is just phoning it in. It made me think.
I'm a fan.
Yeah. I mean, that almost made me think, like, are they trying to do something where they're like using actual like off the grid people as their cast? But no, it's just a bunch of bad actors with one or two scenes.
Let's see what the critics said. I have some good critical stuff. I'll start with the negatives because those are a little bit more exciting. Gene Allen Johnson from San Francisco Chronicle. To get through the first hour, the characters have to be interesting. But these self-absorbed Gen Z wannabe filmmakers are anything but, which I think is a point you kind of brought up too. Kind of boring first hour, doesn't go anywhere, right?
Right. I don't know if I'd say they're self-absorbed.
That's not really true at all.
Yeah, that seems like some generational generalizations.
And
It's
usually
annoying.
self-absorbed would be millennials. Gen Z is considered not as self-absorbed.
Right.
So whatever. What else you got? Let's see. It's clearly an original story that has been slapped with the Paranormal Activity label, and that only adds to the sense that there's little creative depth here. I mean, I don't know if I agree with that.
No, I mean we were just talking about that. That's Brian
Yeah,
Tallarico of
but
Roger Ebert.
okay, I have a whole artistic theory here that I'm going to throw out at you. Right, like I think there is this odd sort of desire to create something that is not within a well-worn frame.
Mm-hmm.
Right, people always want to like, oh, it's not experimental enough, I've seen this before, blah blah blah. There's so much creativity that can happen within pretty strict boundaries, and in fact I would posit that like it's you can get more creativity and richness in a piece of work if you create those boundaries. Like breaking through boundaries is not really something, and this could be genres or how you're using the camera, anything like that. That's really not for everybody. You know what I mean? That's not for the average filmmaker to do. They can try, but there's only a few people that can do it and do it well. So I don't know. I don't get the whole like, oh, it's kind of too genre-y, it's too tropey, but like there can be a lot of creativity in doing that. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, I think maybe this might be semantics, but creative depth is different than creative breadth, right? And I think that.
Well, I think that's where I disagree with this review. I think there's a lot of depth here in the creativity. It's this. Well, just hear me out. Hear me out.
Because it's a deep well that the demon's at the bottom of.
I mean, how do I put this and not sound like a crazy person?
Like these characters are just like the characters are flat, the story's convoluted, the style is all over the place. It doesn't actually adhere to the found footage rules. Like it's not dogmatic. So like what it feels it I think it's easy to find like those, like you mentioned, like there's nothing wrong with like looking for that kind of genre work that's watchable and good enough, but to admit that there's not much depth there. It's just kind of like scattered and ephemeral.
Okay, hold on. Let's keep going on this. Right, so like I approached this movie like I would have approached a straight to DVD film, which if you're younger, you don't really know what you're talking about. But so straight DVD would be like, early 2000s, 2002, 2003, whatever, when DVDs were just starting to take off. And then like there would be these movies that were produced to just sell DVDs. Never in the theater, nothing like that. Really schlocky, really bad. I approached this movie like that. And today the equivalent would be like straight to VOD. Like you don't even see it in theaters. It's just straight to like premium DVD for like $6. You're like, what is this movie? Like, I don't know what this is. It's on like your Comcast or whatever. That's how I approach this movie. And to me, if I'm using that as the framework here, like it's that type of budget, it's that type of just, low quality, then it frees me up to see things in this that are like good. I thought a lot of the camera work was fantastic. I thought the locations were really well done. And there's just stuff about this, like the musical cues I thought were very good as well. The final sequence I thought was fantastic. Again, all within the framework of this is a direct to VOD film, essentially. Right. And now we have to figure out new rules because it's direct to streaming, which is even lower. You know what I mean? Like even lower than a straight to DVD movie. Because no one's going to pay for money to see this. They're just going to have Paramount Plus and then cancel it. But I don't know, like unless they watch Champions League, like I do. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I think that there is something here that is interesting, but I would relate it over to like music. Right, like if you came across a band that clearly does not have even an indie label behind it, probably, and they're making stuff and they're putting up on Bandcamp, you're not going to listen to it the same way you would listen to, something that is, has tens of thousands of dollars behind it in production, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so like, don't you see that a little bit differently?
I don't know. I think there's an interesting actually parallel now that you got me thinking about this, especially regarding like the final sequence of Next of Kin, where arguably, and Anya Stanley says this in AV Club, it pulls itself together during the climax, relocating the demonic mayhem from a single home to an entire village, before building to a muted but disturbing ending that echoes the conclusions of earlier films in the series. I mean, it's kind of it feels to me. It's interesting that it's happening the same year that maybe one of the best or most interesting horror TV series came out. I know you're a fan too of Midnight Mass.
Oh, unbelievable masterpiece.
And I've seen this. I forget where I read it. I closed my tab. But there is definitely a similarity there, right? Of the demon kind of taking over and everybody's killing each other basically in this secluded community,
Mhm.
and that is so much. And you're going to definitely argue that they're different things trying to do different things, but ultimately this is, I think, a strong correlation where like that series was clearly carefully planned out with tons of characterization as well as plotting, and here it's just kind of slapped on the end.
Yeah,
It
that's
doesn't,
true. But like Mike
and
Flanagan got like a decade to write that. Right. You know what I mean? Like
right,
that is a true work. That's like a novel that he's been working on for a decade.
yeah. And I think maybe I'm repeating myself now, but I'm just saying, like, if we're gonna look for something slapdash, I want it to be something gonna that's gonna either raise my pulse or uh, make me laugh out loud, or both. And I was like, on my recliner at 11:30 at night as that was wrapping up, and I was just like, yep, okay. I
Next.
don't know. Yeah, it's
Uh
tepid. I don't know. I see the inklings of it.
I
Like
see a lot of
clearly
sparks, man. I see a lot of creative sparks in this.
it's clearly like this Landon guy's talented,
Yes.
but this is his scraps.
This is his scraps from Freaky.
Yeah.
Which I mean, yeah, you got to see Freaky because it's like
I
you
know,
got
I
to
know.
see within the context of like that movie and like what, because it feels like you're right. It feels like a B-side to those movies is what it feels like. Which I kind of enjoy. I like B-sides. They're a little bit weird.
Deep cut.
Deep cut. I mean, okay, here's the deal on this. Like nobody likes this movie besides like 5 people. And I'm one of those 5 people, and I will admit it. But I think, if you're into like you said, if you're into Paranormal Activity, see it. If you're just kind of interested in like what's out there in horror right now, I would check it out. Like it's a interesting watch, especially if you're into filmmaking. I would say, like,
Yeah.
there's a kind of coolness to what's going on there.
It's probably still a safer bet than Army of Thieves
No,
on
don't watch
Netflix.
that. Nobody watched that. There's no reason Zack Snyder's have that much power. Any closing thoughts on Paranormal Activity next? Okay, here's a question for you. Do you feel like they're going to keep this thing going?
I mean,
because it's open to a sequel, right? Because they get away. Spoiler alert.
that is true. The demon escapes, which I guess is the one connective thread, right? This
I
Osmodeus
guess it's
guys.
the same demon as the one from the original who haunts
How
the
exactly?
girl,
I'm not sure.
the lady.
Whatever. I don't. I feel like this feels kind of like a sputtering fume, and if the box office recovers, like it seems like it's going to at least somewhat, over the course of the next year. I feel like Blum's gonna have something else up his sleeve, or if he doesn't, it's gonna be going. If he goes back to that well, then I feel like at what point do you taint like the Blumhouse brand?
Oh, I think
it
it's been tainted.
Yeah, you think so?
I think so. Yeah, I think the moment I realized it was tainted was Black Christmas remake, which came out in I think December 2019. No, he had like a few in Fantasy Island. I want to say was also him as well. The Blumverse.
True. Okay. Yeah,
and it was really rough. But then he, it was like Black Christmas, Fantasy Island was like, oh, this is not good. And then Invisible Man, they produced Invisible Man, which is one of the better horror movies I've seen in the last decade.
Maybe they should wise up and do their elevated horror brand and then their schlock horror brand.
Well, they got the Wolfman thing, Werewolf with Ryan Gosling. They're doing that. It's part of that whole like universal. It's like the budget bin dark verse. Remember, because they're monster verse because they tried to do the Mummy with So they said Blumhouse, you're the way to go. You're way cheaper than Tom Cruise. Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're going to see another Paranormal Activity movie anytime soon because this is kind of a flop, and I think the fact that they put it on streaming and the critics don't really like it. And the audiences don't really like it. It's a huge loss across the board. Everybody else is wrong except for me. But now we're gonna say that. But yeah, this model is too lucrative to turn. They're just gonna keep going. I do wonder though if it does kind of hit a brick wall at some point. Because like I watched this because we're doing the podcast. If we didn't do the podcast, I would never watch this.
No,
there's no way.
Not.
Like, I would not spend 2 hours to watch this thing.
Right. Especially if there's any other kind of competition out there.
Yeah, like 1,000 great streaming series like Dope Sick or Midnight Matt. Like, there's 1,000. Yeah, there's so much other content to watch out there besides something like this. And I'm glad I did watch it though, because it was just a really fascinating trip for me. Maybe it's just my little trip that I had. It sounds like it. In any event, okay. That's Paranormal Activity. What do we have? I guess I picked the next one, didn't I?
Yeah. What'd you get?
I did Body Heat. And we do have we do have the neo noir from 1981. And we do have special guest and great friend of the podcast, Molly, will be on as a guest for that episode. That should be fun.
It's streaming now on HBO Max. I watched it once having a fever dream back in like 2011, so it'll be interesting to revisit.
It's a real doozy. All right, folks, thanks for listening. This has been Film Trace.